Okay. We are at the end of chapter 25, Matthew 25. And the last time we were here, which has been 2 weeks now, we had talked about, actually, you can go all the way back to chapter 24 of Matthew when Jesus was telling them that you're not going to know when I'm coming back. There's no way of you to know. There's no signs or nothing, so you need to be ready to go at all times. And so then he embarks on these parables. And the first parable was the parable of the 10 virgins, where he basically says that you need to be watching and you need to be prepared, because they had 10 virgins or 5 virgins that, was it 5 or 10 that weren't prepared? Five of them were not prepared. And so then he goes right into the next one. I think he's trying to drive a couple of points home. He gets to the parable of the talents, and he gives a little bit more information. Not only do you need to be watching and be prepared, but I also expect you to be doing something, to be useful. Just because you're watching for me and you're being prepared for me, I expect when I come back to be finding you doing something. So now we get to this third parable about the sheep and the goats, and we're in verse 31, and he's going to give even a little bit more, something else that we need to know, or that his disciples needed to know. So let's look at verse 31. I'm going to read to the end of the chapter. This is chapter 25, verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to drink. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison or go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" And he will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So, Jesus is again referring to the day of judgment, right from the very beginning, when he comes back in all of his glory and the angels come with him and he's sitting on his throne. He's talking about judgment day, and all the nations are going to be gathered together in front of him to be judged by him. And I think something is said. There is absolutely no question as to what is going on here. You're not going to sit back and say, "What's going on?" You are going to know. It's unmistakable. He is going to shine more brightly and more clearly than anybody else during that time, and you're going to know. And who else is in attendance at this big event? Well, we've got the Son of Man. And we got angels. Okay. All along we've been kind of seeing a glimpse into what the jobs of the angels are. Here is another one. They will be present at the day of judgment. We know that they're the ones that are going to separate people in and out. And so he says the angels are going to be there too. They're going to be in attendance. After all the nations come before him, there is going to be a separation process. And he says it's like a shepherd when he at the end of the day, he separates out his sheep and his goats. And apparently this was something that was very common. I don't know why he chose sheep and goat, but there's many times that he had referred to himself as the good shepherd and us as his sheep. And so he just uses that analogy again to help them understand.
Have to be led.
They have to be led. They do. Absolutely. It shows how stupid we could be. Absolutely. But it was a very common practice then that the sheep and goats would graze together out in the field during the day. And when they brought them in at night, they separated them out. And so they knew that. And the other thing is that the sheep in Palestine were normally white and the goats were normally black. So we've got white and black too.
I didn't know they grazed together and then they separated.
That's what they said during that time period. I think that's Lonnie's commentary that actually said that. That they grazed together during the day and separated them out during the night. Why? I'm not sure why they separated them at night, but they did. So now that the question is why he chooses the saved group to be sheep and the poor goats to be the unsaved group, and I guess we'll have to ask him that when we get there.
Yeah, sheep are so much.
Sheep are prettier than goats? I guess so. So anyway, verse 34 is interesting because this is the first and only time that Jesus is going to refer to himself as a king. A king. Then the king will say to those on his right, come. I like that. He's going to use, normally when somebody sits on a platform and they give out punishment, what's the title of that particular person?
Judge.
A judge. Exactly. A judge is somebody that gives out punishment and sits upon a platform. But Jesus is a judge and a king, and he refers to himself here as a king. The difference is if you're a sheep or a goat. Because if you're a sheep, you have a king. But if you're a goat, you have a judge. It's very interesting. The sheep will have a king, a protector, a provider, while goats have a judge that gives out their punishment. And I thought that was very interesting. He uses two different words. Go ahead.
I think the difference maybe between the sheep and the goats might be that what Patricia said, I think, is sheep need to be led around, but goats have a stubborn streak.
Okay, maybe so. Maybe that's why he chose to use those two particular animals, Could be. Yeah. So then he uses two different words. What's the word for the sheep? What's the one word he says? As a king, he says, starts with a C. Come. Come. And the word that he uses for the goats, depart. Yeah, he uses those. Those that are not blessed by God, the word that we'll use will be depart. Those that will come because now he's going to give us a little bit more detail. Simple, everyday deeds of kindness. It's not earth-shattering. These are simple things that he wants to find us. He said already he wants to find us being useful, but now he's giving us a little bit of glimpse into what he expects from us. And these are things that you think, this is what Christian people do all the time. And they're not doing it to earn anything. So many times people will say, you can't earn it, you can't earn it. Yes, that's right, you cannot earn it. But when you're a Christian, you do these things not to become a Christian. You're already a Christian. That's why you do these things. That's why you do them. These things are important, not because of what they gain for the doer, but because what they prove about me. But you think about that. Do we not as individuals gain something from doing acts of kindness? Do I gain something in that?
Of course.
How do you? Yes. Yes.
Joyful.
It makes me feel good. I've heard people say, well, that made me feel good. Well, yes, it makes you feel good. Now, that may not be that isn't the underlying reason why I do these things, but I get some joy and satisfaction from doing something like that for other people. And what it proves to everybody else is that I am Christ-like in my compassion and my character. And isn't that what Christian means? I wear the name Christ. I need to look like him. I need to look like him in compassion and character. So Jesus says that you did these things like you were doing them for me, personally and directly for me, he says. And I want to look at each of these things just a little bit that Jesus said that they did. What's the first one that he said they did? They fed people. If the people were hungry, they fed them, okay? And if they were thirsty, we gave them something to drink. Is that really that hard? Is it hard? Hard to do.
If Tony gave me some last week because we didn't have any water. So we went to her house and filled up some containers.
I had people coming into my house to shower. I felt so bad. I thought, these people don't even have a place to shower.
She wanted us to do that, but we didn't.
Yes, and James and I volunteered on Monday at SOS, and we had about, 4 or 5 times as many people come through the line to pick up food, and about 95% of them have no water in their homes.
Yeah.
And don't know where to go to find somebody to help fix the pipes. It was hard, and hard to see people like that.
We have certainly been reminded, Tom and I, in this past week, of how great it is to have a Christian family.
Yes, it is great to have a Christian family. Jesus goes on to say if someone's cold or they needed a covering, then you give it to them, They welcome strangers into their home. That's interesting.
Can I say something else?
Yes.
Sorry.
No.
Last Tuesday, it was very cold in our house, and we didn't have any water, but we were bundled up and we were okay. But about 10 o'clock, somebody knocked on our door, and there was about 2 inches of snow on the ground, and his footprints you could see were about like this. But the man at the end of our street, who we don't really know other than we just waved to him,
Yeah.
and we've done a few times when they were gone, I fed them their animals, But he walked down to our house and knocked on the door to be sure we were okay.
They talk about people taking advantage of other people, and yet normally what I see is that people really rally around, neighbors rally around one another, trying to help each other to be sure people are taken care of. They do that. But Jesus says that they welcome strangers into their homes. They looked in on others who needed a visit. He specifically says prison. He says it twice. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me, or you did. You came to visit me. And so it's interesting that these little things, and all these things point to really one thing, and that's mercy. Mercy for one another. They looked at people and they saw what they needed, and they did their best to fill or meet those needs. They were merciful, they were compassionate about the needs of other people. It's interesting, we could talk all day about what a Christian's supposed to be doing, but Jesus lays it out and says, this is what a Christian should be doing, okay? I wonder sometimes if we're so wrapped up in our own little world that we overlook those who need help, even basic help. It's something to actually see the needs of people. And in order to see the needs of people, we have to stop looking at ourselves long enough to see that somebody else might need help.
Debbie, I'm wondering if we're going to have to answer for that. The opportunities we might have missed, for the obvious opportunities, not ones that you didn't want to aware of, but obvious opportunities that maybe somebody has needed something and asked you for it and you didn't do it. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
You've got that little small voice in the back of your head that says, you should do this, and it comes, and you think, okay, I need to do that. Now we're human, and sometimes that little voice gets pushed to the back of my head and I forget all about it.
That's why we're glad 1 John 1:7 is in the Bible. We walk in the
The
light.
light as he is in the light. We have fellowship with one another. Yes. You know, we do. I think we need to be aware of those little small voices and those things that say, hey, we might need to do that, or we might need to do that, and capitalize on that. Yeah, I think it's something we need to do. But Jesus said, this is exactly what Jesus had been to these people. He saw them as a sheep without a shepherd. They had no one to see them, let alone help them. And we are most Christ-like when we notice people and we do something to help. His whole life he had been that way. He had seen people where they were at, and he tried to help them. And that's what he's telling us that we should be doing too. And Jesus said that the righteous had been doing all these things. Even the righteous had no idea they had been doing it. What was their response? Verse 37, then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry? We didn't know we were doing that. We didn't know. It's interesting. It tells me something else about this group of people is they're humble. It's not like, oh, look at me and look what I've done. Oh, we didn't know we did that. We just did it, you know. Jesus tells them, if you helped them, you helped me. In verse 40, he says, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. What does that mean, the least of these brothers of mine? I looked at that, I thought, what does he mean by that? Sometimes people want to do things for prominent people. They want to do it for people that are important. I'm going to go take care of this person. I'm going to take care of this person. But he believes in assisting everyone from the least important person to the most prominent person. It doesn't matter where they are in this life. If they need help, we're to notice it and we're to give it. And so that's interesting. So what happens to the other guys on this day of judgment? The goats. Well, it's not good. They must go to a place that was prepared for the devil and the angels. I do love this, the fact that he says that there's a place prepared for the righteous and there's a place prepared for the devil and his angels. And I think, and they've been there since the beginning. It's there being prepared. I always thought about the place that was prepared for me in heaven. You know, in my house there are many rooms, you know, and I think, okay, I have my own room there. And there'll be puppies, because I like to dream about what heaven will be for me. A most beautiful, wonderful place with puppies, okay? But I love that. He's prepared a place for me. And that's very comforting
Never thought of my room.
Very comforting. You know, very, very comforting. But they say there's a place that's prepared for the devil and that there will be eternal fire. That's in verse 41. A burn is painful to the physical body. It's quick, it's immediate, it's very painful. And hell will be painful for the spiritual body. The pain and anguish felt in this place will last forever. And why will they end up there? Simply because they did not do the simplest things for others.
No.
They were.
The children's song that they sang, we don't want to be a sheep.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be a goat. No.
Yeah.
You know, they don't understand this parable.
Right.
They understand that song. You know.
Oh, he does say at the end, I just want to be a sheep. Bah, bah, bah. I just want to be a sheep.
You don't want to be a goat.
No, but you don't want to be a goat. That's exactly right. But these people, they simply simply because they did not do the simplest of things for others. They were not caring, they were not compassionate, they were not merciful. Small deeds of kindness make a difference in one's destiny, and God is very serious about kind-heartedness. He is. So if you look back over those 3 parables, he begins to build upon each one of them. He talks about the virgins that are watching and that are prepared. He talks about the talents for us to be useful with what he has given us and to be doing it. And then he says, and this is what you should be doing. Simple acts of kindness. I love that. Jesus' judgment did not depend upon knowledge here. How much I know about my Bible. I think we should know what our Bible says. But it's not about that, or even the law, or history, or any of that, or anything else we've been taught in our whole life. He just says that you need to be caring for people. It doesn't depend upon our fame or our fortune, but rather on the help that we have given to other people. Simple help to people we may come in contact with every day. And this is not about piling up eternal merit for ourselves. It's more about our natural attitude of kindness toward other people. And I think that was a cool way to end that whole section before we get into this next part. Is there any?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor because it's so easy to love ourselves, isn't it?
Well, he wants you to serve without reward. He wants you to do your own. So.
That's right. And that reward thing, you think, okay, yes, I'm going to do it without any reward at all, but that's not necessarily true. I tell you, I gain more joy out of doing for somebody else and being able to. In fact, you offer somebody, Mary, I want you to come over to my house and take a shower. I want you to do that. And when you turn me down, I'm like, oh man, I wanted to do that for Mary because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good.
Tanya was so thrilled when I came to her house last Friday morning. She was outside, she had her hat, coat, and all, and she was scraping the ice off of the steps of her porch, and helped me up the steps, And she was,
I was told one time.
She was a sheep.
I was told one time by a lady and her husband, they was trying to help me and my kids, and I said, no, she said, and she just got serious, said, are you going to keep me from getting a blessing? I said, no. She said, well, get out of the way.
See, it's sometimes, you look at the different side of it and you think sometimes it's hard for us to accept and be gracious about what has been offered to us. Well, I don't need any help. I'm just fine. I can handle this on my own kind of thing.
If you're feeling like you need to help somebody, Joseph and I need help buying a house.
Oh, okay. Okay. Depends on where it's going to be. Depends on where it's going to be.
No, money spent the same way both sides of the Atlantic.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's move on. Chapter 26. We get to chapter 26 and things are going to dramatically change. Yes, ma'am.
What translation are you using?
I'm in NIV.
Okay.
I look at several others sometimes when I'm doing it, and it's just my crutch. I've been using it for so long that it's very difficult for me to switch now out of an NIV. So anyway, let's look at chapter 26. I'm going to read the plot against Jesus. It's a short segment, verses 1 through 4, and then we're going to discuss that a little bit. Let me check my time. We're doing okay. All right. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, as you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they plotted to arrest Jesus in some sly way and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. Do you see a contradiction right there? What did Jesus just say was going to happen? It's 2 days away. And I am going to be handed over, and I am going to be crucified. And then in the very next verse, we see all these people assembling, and they say, but we're not going to do it during the feast. Who's in charge? We think we're in charge. Even the scribes and the Pharisees and all those people, elders of the people, think they're in charge. We're in charge. We're going to decide. No, we're not in charge. God has decided all along that Jesus is going to be crucified. And Jesus himself says it's going to happen. It doesn't matter what they're thinking or what they're doing. It's going to happen, and he tells his disciples. They are gathering together, but you notice where they're gathering, okay? This is not their usual meeting place. And this is an unofficial meeting, because it seems like to me
It was illegal.
It's illegal. They are keeping it quiet. They don't want the people to know they're meeting, so they chose to meet in the palace of Caiaphas, an unofficial meeting place. Now, this meeting occurred after sundown on Tuesday, which would be the beginning of Wednesday. I know we've talked about this before, but I don't know if you remember it or not. But in a Jewish day, it's from sunset to sunset. Once that sun went down at night, it was the new day. So let's say if the sun goes down tonight at 6:30, it is now Thursday morning for them, Thursday for them. I don't say It's just Thursday. And that's the way it worked. So really, this is sundown on Tuesday, but it is really Wednesday, the Jewish Wednesday. And what are they doing? What are they talking about at this unofficial meeting? Premeditated murder. And how are we going to kill him? Can you believe that the Jewish leaders of the day are going to meet in a secret location for a secret meeting on how to premeditate a murder? That is exactly what they are doing. And I want to tell you a little bit about Caiaphas. Caiaphas holds the office of high priest, but he was placed there in the positions of the Romans, simply because probably they found him useful. Annas was his father-in-law, and he had once held that position. And once you were supposed to have that position, it was supposed to be a lifetime appointment. Why is it that Annas wasn't still the high priest? Well, because the Romans thought, well, I think there's somebody else that might do a better job. They were constantly involving themselves in the Jewish government and the way the Jewish people ran, and they decided who was going to be high priest depending on what they wanted. And so Annas had been displaced, which was not the way it was supposed to be. Caiaphas had been brought in. And so the Romans had taken control of all of this, and they would appoint and dispose whenever they felt like it. So now let's look at that. It says that the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, or the elders of the people assembled. Yours may say took counsel together. So my version does say assembled, but yours may say take counsel. That word, that Greek word, is called sabuya. Sabuya, okay? And it means to consult or deliberate. They're there deliberating and they're thinking. And they were making arrangements on how to murder. This just shows how deceitful the leadership of the Jews had become. They were premeditating murder of an innocent man. They were going to prove him guilty in a lawful court for something that they were not going to prove him guilty in a lawful court for something he was guilty of. Rather, they are working on a way to kill him, knowing he hadn't done anything to deserve death. So these men sit aside and they decide it's going to be better if we wait till after the Passover is over to arrest Jesus. And the reason is because the common man looked upon Jesus as a prophet and a great man. He had gained quite a following. And they didn't want riots and they didn't want trouble, especially when the city is crowded full of people. We have to keep everything under control. And any civil disorder like that could mean Caiaphas loses his position, or Pilate loses his position. We got to make the Romans happy, keep everybody under control. And so under the eye, Caiaphas' watchful eye, he's going to try to control this. So the Sanhedrin decide that it will not take place during the feast, but Jesus himself said, it will. I will be handed over and I will be crucified during this feast. God is in control of this, and he has made his decision regardless of what the Sanhedrin have decided. And who is going to play a huge role in getting it done? Judas is. Judas is going to supply them with exactly what they need. They have a problem. They need a solution. How are we going to do it? And Judas is going to come and hand it to them, is what's going to happen. He's going to expedite Jesus' death is what's going to happen. Let me see if I have any time.
It was prophesied that would happen.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to that part because there's a little scripture that says something to that effect, and it's like, okay, it's got to happen, and it's going to happen this way because of that. I think that may not happen for several chapters. I'm at least a chapter ahead of you. So, all right, so let's look at this. I want to try to get through this next part. Jesus anointed at Bethany. Look at verse 6. While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of a man named Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Are we not sitting here today reading of her and what she has done? It's an interesting thing. You have to know that this is also in different accounts. John's account has this woman, and her name is Mary. That's found in John 12. John 12. Her name is Mary because she's the sister of Martha and Lazarus, all right? And she has come into Simon's home. By the way, Mary and Martha also live in Bethany. They live there too. So they're in the home of Simon, the leper. Apparently, if you had leprosy, you were stuck with that title for the rest of your life. Or maybe it was just easy to identify whose house they were at. But he's there. They're in there. And she brings with her this alabaster jar. Normally, these kind of jars had a very tall, slender neck where only a tiny bit would come out at a time. She has apparently altered this jar in some way. She's either broken it open because it says she poured it. And it says that on John's account as well. She pours out this oil. It may be John's account that says it and not this account that says it. But she does. She's altered the design of that jar so that it would pour out the contents onto Jesus' head. And now, I want you to look at something because this is very, very interesting. This event did not take place in the order it was supposed to. And we find that out in John's account, okay? John 14, I just want to, no, it's John 14. No, it's not 14. It's 12, thank you. It's 12. John 12, I just want you to see what it says, the very first verse of John 12, when it says that this event occurred. 6 days before, we were just at Wednesday, the middle of the week. And now we've got this. Why does Matthew place this event that should have happened even before he came into the city riding on the donkey? Why is it placed here? I just wanted to point that out. Lonnie has a theory. I had no theory whatsoever about why this placement was here. But this is what Lonnie says. He thinks that the reason Matthew put it here, and remember, these are God-breathed. This is the way God wanted it. Okay, why Matthew put it here. He thinks that the reason it was put here was to show the moment that Judas hatched his plot to betray Jesus. Because what is the next passage of Scripture in Matthew? It's about Judas agreeing to betray him. So it seemed like the perfect spot to put this, because that's when it's going to happen in the mind of Judas, or at least Lonnie thinks. This little section of Scripture is about the disciples and their thoughts about money that is being wasted. This section we just talked about was the plotting of the Sanhedrin. They're looking for a way to get rid of Jesus. And now here's a section about what is going on in the minds of Jesus' own disciples. It did occur earlier, but we need to know that. And who do we know to be the treasurer of the money? Judas. None other than Judas. So Lonnie believes the seed of betrayal was planted in Judas's mind at this event. It would make sense, Matthew and Mark both do this, go back in time and place this encounter between the Sanhedrin's plot and Judas's agreement with the chief priest. John's account will point out that it was Judas that had the ejection, and it was Judas that received the rebuke. It may be that Jesus' rebuke of Judas on this occasion pushed him over the edge, made him angry, because the very next part in this chapter is him agreeing to betray Jesus himself. Matthew has all the disciples included in this objection and this rebuke. It was extravagant. It was an unnecessary use of something that was very precious and very expensive, and they noticed it, and they took offense. Why would you be so wasteful? You know, why? But there's one difference between Judas's reaction and the others, and John is the one that points it out. Judas was moved by greed. He had already stolen money. If you get a chance this week, you need to go and read John's account in John 12 and read that, because John gives a little more information about Judas and where his heart was had already been. The others were honestly disturbed, thinking that surely there would have been a better use of this money. They could sell it and use the money for some benevolent need. But John tells us that Judas had been stealing from the group's money and pocketing it for himself, and his motive was selfishness. So it's a perfect placement. Even though we know this happened days before, the placement of it is perfect because it's preparing you for what Judas is about to do. Jesus is going to defend Mary's actions. Jesus reminds them that there will always be poor people that need help, but he's not always going to be around. Mary has chosen to do this for him, and he wasn't going to be around much longer. His time was limited. And Jesus said that she did this to prepare him for burial.
Wouldn't you like to picture that though? I mean, he's sitting there, and she, you know, I guess I forgot, she poured it on his head.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if that was a common practice.
I think for burial it was. They put all those spices and things on them.
After they were dead.
It was. But is she going to have opportunity to do that?
No, yeah.
This is her opportunity, and he's giving it to her. I said, did Mary have a certain insight to what Jesus had been saying? Did she do this because she wouldn't have opportunity to prepare his body in the Jewish manner when he died? Does anyone present seem to have the understanding of the impact of his words about burial? He's been talking about crucifixion. He's just told them, I'm going there and they're going to crucify me. They're going to kill me. And now he mentions the word burial. You know, who knows? What we know is that Jesus paid Mary a high compliment when he said, no one is going to forget this. No one. Whenever and wherever the gospel is preached, this act is going to be remembered. And this scene was recorded by 3 of the gospel writers. I guess what I like most about this story is that Mary took her most expensive, precious thing that she had, and she used it for Jesus. Mark and John both say that the perfume was worth a year's wages. Think about that. Think about what you have in possession of yourself that is worth a year's wage. And that's what she's going to give to him. This is an indication of how love works. Love does not calculate. It doesn't think of how little it can give. Love's desire is to give it all, and when it has given everything it can, and still believes that that gift is too small. Because love is not rational. Love shows us that there are times when common sense fails us. On this occasion, the voice of the common mind said, what a wasteful thing to do. That's what the common mind would say. And that is true and right. But there's a huge difference between the economic common sense and the economic sense of love. Because common sense is prudent, while love only obeys the demands of the heart. You know? No. A gift is never really a gift if you can easily afford it. It becomes a much deeper gift when there's a sacrifice behind it. And she was willing to sacrifice that.
Well, Mark says she broke the jar.
Okay, so she altered, she did. She broke it. So that's what Mark said. I was going to say I read that somewhere.
She was going to use all of it.
She did use all of it.
It wasn't like she was going to just do a little bit.
No,
It's not the drop that normally would come out. She broke it. She had to alter that to get it out. The last thing I want you to think about is the scene about certain things being done when an opportunity arises. We've already talked about this a little bit. There are some things that can be done anytime, and there are others that can only be done once. To miss an opportunity to do some things may be missed forever. It's amazing to me when I get ready to do a lesson how applicable it is. Because when I think about Bill and what he was sitting right here last Sunday morning, and I was sitting over there, and he had some comments and things, and I tried to think, did I greet him? Did I hug him? Did I tell him how much I love him that particular day? You know, did I tell him how grateful I am for all that he does? And I think, what a missed opportunity, but Mary didn't miss it. She didn't miss that opportunity. Sometimes the tragedy of this life is a history of lost opportunities to do lovely things for one another.
Amen.
And the fragrance of that lasts forever. It does. And so it's very interesting. I feel like God works in my lessons. And when I sit here and I start to tell you about the lesson that was prepared months ago that fell today, it's amazing to me.
That's just like, Valentine's Day, that lesson was just perfect. Did you see that? It's like, how did you,
Yes,
I mean, it just works out that way.
it just works out.
Wonderful.
So we're going to end it there, and we'll get back to Judas next week.